Coming up on tonight's episode of Faith versus Culture, do Christians have an obligation to help Afghans? We're going to dive into this and more coming up next.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Faith versus Culture right here on the CBN News Channel. I am FaithWire Managing Editor Dan Andros, and I'm joined by author, journalist Billy Hallowell. Billy, what's going on?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I mean, anytime we have a really slow couple of news weeks like this, it's always good to have you by for a chat. I mean, nothing going on. Absolutely nothing.
It's been very quiet out there. Yeah, nothing to be disturbed or worried about in the world. It's very peaceful.
Yeah, and I joke about it, but I mean, I wish it was a funnier topic, but it is obviously exactly the opposite of that. And so the question we kicked off there is, do we have an obligation as Christians to help Afghans? Because Billy, I know you see everything that's going on in the narratives, the various narratives that are happening on social media, as well as I do. And there is a lot of debate centering around this idea that we should just get out of there and wipe our hands of this situation. It was going to be bad no matter how we pulled that Band-Aid off. It was going to be bad. You saw the president say that. I've seen a lot of Christians echoing that same sentiment, that we're not the world's police. We shouldn't be around. And I think there is an argument to be made on that. But the fact of the matter is we were there. And so I think that complicates that argument a little bit. And obviously we've all seen over the past couple of weeks just horrific images of desperate Afghans clinging to a plane and falling from the sky because they were that desperate. We've seen parents, moms handing babies over the fence, over the barbed wire to troops. I mean, can you imagine, Billy, the level of desperation that you must have to hand your child over to a random soldier on the other side of a barbed wire fence? That's the kind of mind-boggling images we're seeing here. And so then it really sort of grates at your sensibilities when your heart is breaking seeing images like that. And then to say, well, what can you do? Time to go. So it's tough. It's a tough argument to make. So where do you want to start on all this?
Well, I mean, who are they handing their babies to? What planes are they clinging to? They're handing their babies to American soldiers. They're handing their children to strangers, but these strangers they know are Americans. And so even when you ask that question, right, of do we have a responsibility? I think the natural answer to that, is yes. A lot of us want to say no, but it's interesting too. I guess the starting point for me is the world police argument, because it does feel like there are times where we will say, well, we can't be the world's police. But there are plenty of times that we have no problem being the world's police. And listen, there are times that we might need to be the world's police. I think it's very easy to sort of conclude on either side of this that you just have the answer, like, oh, we just need to leave. That's it. That's the answer. There's a lot of gray area here. I think for me, as a Christian, my starting point, and as an American, is saying, okay, well, if we do this thing, i.e. leave, what is the result? If we know the result is going to be an immediate crisis that leaves people dead and then trapped under a regime, by the way, a regime that we not only, toppled and tried to push out, but one that we know how it will operate. This is the Taliban. They're not new to the game. We know who they are. We know how they operate. So to leave a country worse off than when we went into it 20 years ago seems absolutely to be a horrific option. And yet here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough because, I mean, we at CBN and FaithWire, we've talked to Gold Star family members, and that's where your mind races to when you see kind of just wiping our hands clean of it. Did that just negate And that's how they feel. These Gold Stars family feel like you just trampled on my son or my daughter's sacrifice. And it's extremely hard for them to deal with. And especially when, because I can understand we don't need to be militarily involved in every single country around the world. It's not, I would tend to agree with that sentiment. I think a lot of Americans agree with that sentiment. But the fact of the matter is that we were there, and especially with the troop presence reduced down to, I think, 2,500 troops, and there was very little incidents happening in the past few years. So is it that bad to have those troops in there? Because at times it could feel like, Billy, that the administration, both Trump and the Biden administration, felt like they were going for a headline win by saying they were the ones to get us out of Afghanistan and they were the ones to end the war. They kind of wanted that, and then just figured they'd get the praise from the media for ending the war, and then that was that. But obviously it didn't turn out that way. It was a complete and total disaster, and we're seeing human suffering that I don't think is going to leave people's minds anytime soon.
No, and listen, the people in this country, we are war weary. I mean, go back, and what's so sad about this is that we are just weeks away from 9/11, which was the event, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, the event that touched all of this off, right? I mean, let's go back 20 years and let's consider, and before I even go there, the troops, the people who have fought there, who have lost limbs, who have lost lives, the families who have suffered. It is a tough pill to swallow to say, well, we've lost this and we're just going to move on now as though the last 20 years didn't happen. Now, that doesn't mean that that's a reason to continue fighting something that you believe isn't going to be winnable. But to your point, we definitely had a much more peaceful situation 2 weeks ago than we do right now. I mean, so to me, I look around the world and I see that U.S. troops are all over this world. Nobody's calling for the tens of thousands of troops that have been in South Korea to just leave South Korea now. And the reason I bring that up is that the Taliban, if you recall, were they not involved in harboring and sort of shielding terrorists? Have they not been involved in public executions of their own people? These are things that were going on regularly when they were in charge of Afghanistan, and we're already hearing reports of women being beaten, of this chaos that we saw before coming back into fruition. So it seems to me that the deeper thought here, and maybe I don't have the answer to this, but my question is, by leaving, are we opening another gaping hole that all of our other enemies can use to not only hurt us, but to hurt others around the world through terrorism? Because you're, again, putting the Taliban back in charge of an entire country. It just seems to me like it's a no-brainer to have some sort of presence there.
Yeah, and we haven't even touched on Christians yet, Billy. We're talking about just our troops, the impact it's had on the people who serve there. Or you talk about the Afghans who helped us, and then we made promises to them, and it sure looks like we're breaking those promises. So that doesn't even address the Christians yet. You touched on how the women are persecuted there, but there have been reports as well of Taliban going door to door and looking through people's phones, looking for Bible apps, looking for things that would identify them as Christian. And we all know in the radical Islam world what it means to be an apostate. And what that means is you're going to probably die, or at least suffer some very severe punishment. So that's where I kind of want to lock in for a minute here, Billy, is on what is our obligation as Christians wanting to help other Christians there. I'll touch on a couple Bible verses here to kick it off. But when you look at the Bible, it certainly indicates that we have a responsibility to help not just other people, but other Christians. Look at John 13, love one another. Galatians, serve one another. I'm not going to read the whole verses, but 1 Thessalonians 5:15, be kind to one another. This is all in the context of fellow believers. 1 John 1:7, have fellowship with one another, offer hospitality to one another. 1 Peter 4:9, confess your sins to one another, pray with one another. James 5:16, carry one another's burdens. Galatians 6:2, encourage one another. 1 Thessalonians 4:18. So, I mean, Galatians 6:2 right there, carry one another's burdens. I mean, the imagery there is, you're literally picking it up and carrying it. So how do you do that? I mean, it seems like you'd have to do at least something to offer some help there in Afghanistan.
I mean, and that's the thing. We were already there. It's like, when you've pulled out and you've left 2,000 plus vehicles there. I mean, these people have literally better equipment than they did last time around because we've given it to them. And so you have to imagine what's going to happen to those Christians already. If you look at Open Doors USA, you look at their report, Afghanistan before the Taliban, came back into power this past week and a half, they were already the second worst place in the world to live as a Christian in Afghanistan. And so knowing that there were already all of these clan issues, right, in the culture, knowing how much time it takes to root that out, knowing that we were already there, I can't imagine how much worse that is going to get for Christians and other minority groups there. We do have a responsibility. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just biased here or not thinking clearly, but America is the most privileged, wealthy nation in the history of man, and certainly in the world today. I can't imagine that with all the resources we have, that the answer would be just abandon the Afghans and just abandon the Afghan Christians who we know, again, this is not a question of maybe this will happen or, I don't know, maybe they won't be too nice to the Christians. They have already done these things. We already know what they will do. Leaving them from a Christian perspective feels so wrong to me. And so that I just, for me, that's a huge sticking point here is what is our responsibility, not only as Americans, but then really as Christians. And I would add, many of the people advocating that we just leave and abandon these people are the very same people making arguments for how we should help those on the border, here in our own country. And I think that's a very interesting conversation to make too. But it seems like we're sort of speaking out of two different ends of our mouth when it comes to these issues.
Yeah, and it's a good idea to check where are we being driven by politics or by our faith. And when you get challenged, when you're going against maybe your own typical party that you align with, that's a time to really check your heart and see if you align. And there are lots of arguments on both sides, and I'm sure we're going to hear about it. You can email us, contact@faithwire.com. Go ahead and send the hate mail if you want. We can handle it. We'll probably even respond. So, all right, well, we're going to come back and have more conversation on this. The comparisons being made to the Taliban, people comparing Christians in America to the Taliban. We'll have that and more coming up next.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
All right, welcome back to this episode of Faith versus Culture. Dan Andros here, Billy Hallowell there, talking about our need as Christians. What is it? What is our need? No need, a big need to help Afghans who are currently just going through a horrific situation, and in particular, Christian Afghans. What is our obligation to them? Wanted to shift gears a little bit here, Billy, because I've seen this multiple times, and perhaps you have too. Christians kind of being aligned with terrorists and the Taliban and Al Qaeda in these comparisons now that are kind of casually being thrown out and not really dismissed. Is this something we need to worry about?
Yeah, not only do we need to worry about it because it leads down a very slippery slope, but we need to worry about it because it defies all logic. And it tells me that when somebody is employing these crazy comparisons, taking somebody that they don't like in their own political realm and comparing it to terrorists and people who murder people, that they have no concept of reality, essentially, or of the reality in which we are living. And that's a big deal because it shows me that people don't actually understand who the Taliban are, what the Taliban are capable of, what they've done to people. And it's one of those things, you know, when you see these comparisons, there was one, in fact, that Faithwire covered. It was a pretty interesting story. It was a MSNBC contributor, and basically this person was comparing, I think, pro-lifers to the Taliban, essentially. And there was a quote, I'll read it. It says, "The Taliban aren't the only ones trying to impose their will on women's bodies and choices." And so with that line, you see, okay, so the pro-life people who are trying to protect unborn babies' lives, well, I guess they're kind of similar to the Taliban who want to just, you know, not allow women to work, breathe, eat, sleep, or do anything, right? But it really does expose that you have this scenario where people are not understanding the gravity of the situation. I think we can get some people are going to get angry and frustrated by the comparison. Others are going to be, you know, laugh it off. But I think we actually have to look at it and say, wait a minute, if you're making these comparisons between conservative Christians in America who are not murdering people, who are not taking people's right to live away, and you're comparing conservatives to people literally who are willing to murder and harbor terrorists, then you have no concept of what's going on. And how can we fight a battle against what's going on or even confront it if we don't have a concept of what is actually happening?
Yeah, and I mean, it's just a troubling trend. Another one I saw was late night host Stephen Colbert kind of dismissed the concern, saying, you know what, we shouldn't be in Afghanistan. We've got to worry about terrorists right here at home. And he was referring to January 6th and those that rioted on January 6th, which obviously wasn't good, but at the same time, not even close to on the same level as what has happened in Afghanistan with the Taliban. I mean, it's absurd to even, I just don't think people really have a clue. Billy, I'll just add this from my own personal experience. I mention this often because it's like a searing moment in my life when I reported from Iraq for a week and I went and I got on the front lines against ISIS. Now, I was with Peshmerga soldiers. Yeah, we went to the front line. Yes, ISIS was shooting like rockets and all this crazy stuff over, but it was generally pretty safe. As my translator jokingly would say, it's dangerous, but safe. And that was our big catchphrase the whole time there. But that was nerve-wracking to me. I'd never been in a war zone. And I'm watching this CNN reporter walk around, and she's, I think her name's Clarissa Ward. I'm going to probably botch that up. It's Clarissa something. But she's just walking around there at the airport at Kabul, and there's gunfire going off. Some Taliban guy ran in front of her and like cocked the gun. You just don't realize how dire it is and how desperate and how dangerous that situation is. And how awful the Taliban, I mean, like you said, Billy, their PR message is, oh, we're a more inclusive Taliban, but they were dragging a dead soldier through the body, and the body through the streets just the day before. They clearly haven't changed. They're just trying to put on a better PR.
Well, and we talked about this earlier in the show, but I think it's worth revisiting because the most sobering moment and the most horrifying thing I think I've ever watched was watching those people cling to an airplane knowing that they were going to die. They were so desperate. Nobody's clinging to an airplane at JFK Airport to escape on an American Airlines plane out of America because the conservatives are so scary and terrible. Right. And I think, you know, I don't even mean to make light of it. It's so horrifying. It's
a laughable argument. Yeah. That's the only reason I'm laughing is because it's such a ridiculous point.
No, 100%. I mean, it's laughable to consider that these people think that this is the same thing. But see, this is the way that we really need to fix this in our dialogue. This is sort of the old Adolf Hitler comparison. Everybody you don't like is Adolf Hitler, right?
Hitler, right?
And it's like that is not how you win. A, you don't win an argument that way, but B, you really diminish other people's suffering in that way as well, even if you don't realize you're doing it. And I think a lot of these people, they're just being lazy. They're not even recognizing how insane these comparisons are. And I think we need to call them out when we see them and say, look, do you know, let me tell you 10 things the Taliban did today. And let me see you then compare that to the people you're upset about who are conservatives in this country. And you'll realize how ridiculous it is.
Yeah. And we're running out of time here, Billy. So I want to take a break. And on the other side of the break, we're going to look at ways Christians can help, because, I mean, hopefully, whether you agree or not with the government staying or going, hopefully everyone can agree that where people are helping on the ground there, we should try to help. And there's a couple great things going on. Christians taking some really cool action, and you can support them too. And we'll show you how on the other side of the break.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
In ministering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to cbnnewschannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
All right, we are back. Dan Andros here, Billy Hallowell there, talking about Christians and Afghanistan and all of the craziness that's been going on here recently with that. And wanted to leave everybody on a positive note here, Billy. Glen Becks' audience. Now, this is something that's not going to get mainstream exposure for obvious reasons, but Glen Becks' audience just went absolutely insane on the fundraising front to help Christians and people trapped in Afghanistan. What happened there?
Yeah, so this is crazy. They have a plan, the Nazarene Fund, which is his organization that he works with, Glenn, to fly 5,000 people out of Afghanistan, to rescue these people, take them out of Afghanistan, get them out of there. And Glenn went on the air, I think it was Wednesday morning, and said, look, I want you guys to help. Please donate. And the crazy thing is that $22 million in counting has been raised for this effort to help rescue people from Afghanistan. I don't know the logistics of it, but it seems like a phenomenal plan. And it's amazing to me and this is why that Americans believe we have a responsibility, because they raised $22 million in a couple of days.
2 days. Yeah. In just 2 days. Absolutely unbelievable. And I will say that I'd mentioned my trip to Iraq earlier, Billy, and at that time, the Nazarene Fund with Glenn, and I was actually working for Glenn at that time, they ended up using the Nazarene Fund to help some Christians who were trapped in Iraq and couldn't get out and wanted to get out of there. That was at a time when ISIS still controlled several places. A lot of people still in danger, just didn't have anywhere to go, and they needed to get, the country was in shambles, no jobs, anything like that. They needed to get out. And they were able to get a lot of people out to safety, and they worked contacts on the ground in-country contacts, working with a lot of people in the Middle East to help get that done. So it's really pretty crazy. It's really pretty cool. And, you know, even if you get, I don't know how many they'll be able to get out in Afghanistan. Obviously a crazy situation, but we'll be definitely praying that it works and that God puts favor on the people that are attempting to do that, especially if the government is failing in its effort to do so. But nevertheless, Nazarene Fund, a great place to donate if you want to contribute to directly to helping get some Christians out.
And it's nazarenefund.org. That's the website. And just as a side note, we should be praying, and we should be praying for the Afghan people. I mean, I know a lot of us, you're like, some people might be like, I can't give. I don't have any money to give. We should be praying. Get like a note card out. Write down the Afghan people, the Afghan military. You've got, obviously, we talked about Christians who are there, specifically praying for the Christian population. But guess what? Like, even praying, obviously, for our quote-unquote enemies, for the Taliban, that there'd be changed hearts, changed minds. I mean, we should be in prayer endlessly about this, because it is heartbreaking. And we know that we can always find hope in Christ. And so I would just leave people on that note, too, to turn to prayer during this time.
That's a great spot to leave it. Thanks, Billy, for joining us. And we will be back here on the other side of the break to wrap it up.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Wednesday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
All right, that is all the time we have for this episode of Faith versus Culture. As always, thank you so much for joining us. We will be praying for you as you go out throughout your week, and we'll see you back here in a week. God bless.